A lot of people look at it and go, really? I say, yes, really.
Oh, they don't believe it?
No.
So we're here with David and his awesome Datsun 240Z, mate. I think this is the first one we've ever featured on Full Boost in like 26 years or something.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming around and having a look at it.
From the outside now, you wouldn't appear that anything is really untoward, would you?
No, and that's why I like cars to be look unassuming, looking fairly standard from the outside, but underneath a different story. I like to surprise people, so when you open the bonnet, they say, what the?
I think I first saw this at a car show we were at. And a lot of people were having a look at your engine. Now, I guess the point of difference in this is that it's not Datsun powered anymore, is it?
No, it's sacrilege for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So the purists, not too happy about it, but I've driven a standard 240Z before, and to be honest, they're not all that inspiring. You know, they're not overly powerful. Steering's really heavy. Brakes are okay on them, but yeah, for me, there's lots of things you can improve, but still have a classic looking Datsun as well.
So I guess a lot of people, if you wanted to modernise the car, you'd probably put a Nissan RB engine in it. This is pretty common on a Datsun. How did you end up going down the European route?
Yeah, so it all started with back in the day when I was at Castrol, so I spent many years in the Castrol automotive business, and at that time I was also looking after motorsport, and we had a global partnership with BMW which also extended to the Williams Formula One team, and through that connection I was able to attend and have the opportunity to do one of their BMW advanced driver training courses down at Phillip Island. I turned up to this event not really knowing what to expect, but I've done some advanced driver training courses before which were okay. This was when E46 M3s were brand new, and that was the car which they used on the day, and I'd never driven an M BMW before. And I came away from the day just totally blown away by how good the chassis was, but particularly the engine. The engine was just amazing. At that time I'd done quite a lot of conversions to different cars, but they'd all been carburettor V8s, and I just thought, how cool would it be to take one of these, you know, really leading edge high-tech BMW engines and put it in a classic car. And that's where it all started.
What came first, the engine or the car?
Kind of both at the same time, to be honest. The engine, when I was trying to buy one, you just couldn't buy them in Australia for love or money. So in the end, I ended up buying 2 complete drivetrains out of E36 BMWs from the UK, because in the UK and Europe, they're plentiful. This engine is, in BMW speak, is an S50B32. So this is out of the later E36 M3s, or they sometimes call them the Evo E36 M3. The earlier one had a 3 litre, still 6 throttle body, but single Vanos. And the Evo version, which this is a 3.2 litre dual Vanos. So these are 321 horsepower, which, to give people some perspective, it's about the same power as a stock LS1.
So in layman's speak, you're essentially got control of both cams in this one.
Yeah, and they're infinitely variable too. So a lot of adjustable or variable cam timings, they have like a specific RPM when they'll kick in or kick out. But this is infinitely variable. So it makes them pretty complicated. The Vanos systems do have some issues around them, around reliability, but you can buy a kit to refresh them and rebuild them, replace the seals, which you pretty well need to do because otherwise they don't work properly. But yeah, so I bought 2 complete drivetrains, so engines, gearboxes, rear diff and suspension, ECUs, everything, so that you could take these parts and put them in a body in a car here in Australia. And I sold the 3 litre single Vanos version and kept this for myself.
So why did you buy this over the E46 engine?
Because the E46 was drive-by-wire, and at that time when I first did this, people can do it now, but at the time there was no one around who could confidently say that they could make the drive-by-wire E46 engine work outside of a BMW chassis.
So you've had this engine in the car for quite some time, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been in the car for 3-4 years now. The mechanical side of this was actually pretty straightforward and simple as far as making mounts for the engine and for the transmission. It was easy. The challenging part, and particularly for me, was the electrical side of it. So you can choose to make the factory BMW security system work. It's called EWS2. And when you understand what it needs and when it needs it, it's pretty straightforward. With the BMW, the way the security system works, you've got to have the matching ECU with the matching EWS2 security box and the matching key. So you've got to have all 3. if they don't match, it won't go. Without that knowledge prior, it was a bit of a, like reading BMW wiring diagrams was for me a real challenge. But I got on top of it in the end, and it works flawlessly now. The car's fairly firmly sprung, so it's got MCA coilovers on all four corners. I haven't got the valving too aggressive, but it performed well on the track day I did at Sandown. And I got adjustable brake bias on it, not in cabin and under the bonnet.
It's still not that loud when you get on it. Like, it's nice. Like you said, it's not boomy at all.
It's got your typical 6-cylinder inline sound to it. I would have liked to have had a bit more induction noise, but beggars can't be choosers.
What do these engines turn to out of the box?
7.5.
Yeah.
The most appealing thing about the engine for me is the responsiveness. Your right foot is so well connected to the engine and to the way the car drives. It's very, very responsive.
So it still sort of accelerates okay, even if you're in one gear too high?
Yeah, easily, yeah. I mean, obviously, pick the right gear and it's pretty quick.
So this has the BMW gearbox, the whole driveline, or is this just the gearbox and engine?
Just the gearbox and engine.
Yep.
Yeah. So the gearbox is actually a ZF 5-speed out of the earlier 3-litre M3, only because it's small enough and compact enough to be able to fit in the tunnel without chopping the tunnel up. The gearbox which comes behind the 3.2-litre version, which I've got here, is actually the same gearbox. It's a Getrag gearbox, same as in the Mark IV Supras. And it's a big, heavy gearbox. It wouldn't fit in the tunnel without cutting the tunnel up. I didn't want to cut the car up, so it's chassis number 728, build date 4th month 71. So it's an early car, so it's got some inherent value. Everything which I took out of the car, which is Datsun, I've kept. So if someone who was crazy enough to wanted to buy the car and take this out and put it all back to standard, they could.
They could, okay. In this car, is fifth gear an overdrive or is that 1-to-1?
No, it's actually 1-to-1. So I'm running a 3.54 diff ratio, which it's probably little on the short side, but it's not too bad.
Yeah.
And I'm not one for screaming down the road at 200 k's an hour, obviously. So I like it to be responsive, and so the 354 was a good compromise.
So it's pretty good. How does that go on the freeway at 100 clicks? What do you?
Yeah, it's about 3,200 RPM.
Okay, yeah, so it's a little bit high.
Yeah. But it's an engine that likes to rev, it's not a problem for the engine.
So how did you get into the Datsuns? Because you haven't had Datsuns before, have
No,
you?
I wasn't a Datsun person at all. So
because you've picked probably the most sought after model these days, isn't it? This or either maybe a Datsun 1600.
Yeah.
Pretty popular.
And I wasn't really particularly fussed as to what car I was going to put it in. But then the more I got involved with looking at the Datsuns and the 240Z, 260Z, the fit for the engine was just a natural fit. Naturally aspirated inline 6.
So you said earlier you picked up the car and it wasn't in, obviously, standard Datsun, it wasn't in a great shape.
No, so just word of mouth for a friend of a friend who went to look at it, and he had a pretty small garage, but he had a really nice collection of classic Japanese motorcycles. So Suzuki water bottles, 1100 katanas, CB 750s, bikes of that era, 70s ilk. And he had quite a few of them, all stripped and all put in different states of repair or restoration. And this Datsun was sitting in the corner, and he'd chemically stripped all the paint off the car 17 years previously and just left it. He hadn't put anything on it. And so the whole car was just rust brown, like a really thin film of rust. The running gear was still in it, and everything which he'd taken off, all the panels were taken off it. He had everything stored and marked in boxes, and he was pretty confident they were all there. So we talked to him back and forth for a couple of weeks, and in the end I kind of convinced him that the car was probably better off with me than it was with him.
You'd think after 17 years it's not happening.
No. So cut a long story short, after I finished the restoration, and as you see it today, I took it to show it to him a couple of years ago, and he was just blown away. He couldn't believe it. And as he said, look, I could never have done it justice and done what I'd done with it. So it was a good ending for him. I think he was happy to see that it went to a good home, and it turned out really well.
And you've obviously detailed under it, and you don't even wash this, do you?
No, it doesn't get washed with a hose. It's never been driven on a wet road, never driven in the rain. And the underbody is the same colour as the top side, because I like to be able to see what I'm doing underneath the car. If you paint the underneath of a car, so I've got a hoist which I can work on it, but the underneath of the car is just as shiny and as clean as the top side is, and that's the way I want to try and keep it. But also a lot of time and effort went into the restoration. It was a full rotisserie restoration back to a bare shell, even to the extent of taking the roof and the rear quarters off the car. And the guys who did the panel and the paint for me did a fantastic job, Glenn and Alan.
This is the factory colour?
This is the factory colour, Safari Gold, or Poo Brown as a lot of people call it.
Baby Poo Brown.
Baby Poo Brown, yes, yeah. And like I agonised over what colour to do for a long, long time. In the end, I couldn't come up with an alternative, and I think the classic colours had come back.
They never go out of fashion on the car they came out.
I'm wrapped with the colour, I love it. I wouldn't have done it anything else in hindsight now.
Yeah, and your wheels are a good choice for this era of car. I mean, you see this style of wheel on a lot of...
Yeah, they're pretty classic wheel choice, you know, rotor RBs they are.
Have you weighed it? Because this would have had to have been weighed for engineering? Or?
Yeah, so I approached him before I even started the build and said, look, this is roughly what I want to do. And so I went through a whole list of the modifications, including brakes, suspension, so it's got MCA coilovers, R33 GDST front brakes, R31 Skyline rear brakes. The diff is an R200, so
they're pretty bulletproof, aren't
they?
Pretty
bulletproof, but it's got an RS Geiken LSD in it, which is, to be honest, one of the best parts of the car. It's really progressive, makes it a real pleasure to drive. But talking to the engineer, he was happy with everything which I planned to do, and I said, well, do you want to come and see it at any stage during the build? And he said no. He said, if you just do everything you say you're going to do, bring the car to us when it's finished, and hopefully it'll pass. And he was very complimentary about the car in general when it was presented to him, and had no problems with engineering. And as you said, it was weighed, so it's 1,080 kilos.
Oh, is that it? Wow.
Yeah, so it's only, standard 240Z is 1,045 kilos, so it's only 35 kilos more. One of the reasons why it feels so lively to drive is because it is so lightweight.
What does the E36 weigh in comparison?
Yeah, so that's the interesting thing. So the original E36, which the engine came from, is 1,450 kilos. Yeah. So it's nearly 400 kilos difference. And that's why the thing just goes so well. It's a stock engine, still makes the same sort of power as the stock LS1. The car's so light and the wheels break traction so easily that you're never really loading the clutch up.
Yep.
So it doesn't need a really heavy high performance clutch.
Oh, because you've only got a fairly small tyre on this, haven't you?
Yeah, it's only a 205 tyre, so you're pretty limited traction wise. I wanted to keep everything light, so the steering's nice with the power steering. It's got good weight and good feel to it. The accelerator's nice and light, the clutch is light, and the brakes are really responsive. The engineer was very complimentary about the brakes. He was very pleased with the way they worked.
So this has actually nothing done to it, has it?
No, it's dead stock.
Even though these look like headers, this is all standard, isn't it?
Correct, yeah.
Oh, your exhaust is?
So from the headers back was custom. So I drew up the muffler, the centre muffler and the rear muffler. Had a guy in Tassie who was on the Z forum, put them together for me, and then basically built the whole thing from the headers back.
Surprised how quiet it is, David.
Yeah, it's actually not too bad. You know, one of the big concerns I had was making sure that it didn't get too drummy or resonating. So there's nothing worse than cruising on the highway and the thing's just making your ears bleed.
What size is the exhaust?
Between 2 1/4 into a mid muffler, then to 2 resonators, and then out to the rear muffler, which is a 3-inch single outlet. Yeah, so all the factory BM systems is a twin all the way through to the rear, but they're pretty small diameter. So this is bigger. I kind of modelled it on what all the aftermarket performance exhausts were, so they're all seem to be like twin 2 1/4. One of the things that struck me when I drove a standard 240Z for the first time was how heavy the steering is. So the rack and pinion steering. So one of the other things with this car which I wanted was to put power steering in it. So the BMW engine comes with a serpentine drive for all the accessories, including the power steering pump. So I had a hydraulic power steering pump, just had to find an alternative rack. And there's a couple of different types which people use. So WRX Subaru rack, shorten it to match the same size as the original Z rack. WRX power steering racks, MX5 has been done by a few different people. You can now buy conversion kits using electric power steering columns. Okay. The feel and the responsiveness and the way this rack works is really nice. It's not overly light, but it's not heavy either, and it's got a nice amount of feedback through the steering wheel. And it's got a small steering wheel. It's got a genuine Nissan Compy steering wheel on it.
Because the original Zeds didn't have a really thin steering wheel, did
Yeah,
they?
they do, yeah. But you needed a decent sized wheel because you needed the leverage.
One bit I like, it's pretty hard to go past that top stage centre console. That's cool.
Yeah, so Freddie did that for me. He does a fiberglass version now because all the 240Z consoles they're just broken from old age.
I looked at it from a distance and I thought, that's pretty good carbon wrap. And then I stuck my head in and I'm like, oh no, that's not wrap.
Biggest difference to the interior though was the seats. So when I first got on the road, I had the standard original seats, which did a track day at Sandown, and it was like hanging onto the steering wheel and trying to not fall off the seat was a bit of a battle. So got the Velo seats, which fit really well. One of the issues with the cars is they're actually pretty narrow.
It's an issue in a lot of two-seat cars, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Your seat choice.
Yep.
They look really good. I love you can't go past the 240 dashes.
The dash, like most dashes from cars out of the 70s, was pretty destroyed by the sun. So Dash Doctor in Coburg did a repair on it, and it came up really well. Full custom speed gauges in it.
It's got such a timeless inside and outside this car.
Yeah,
it's
the interior
dated so well, hasn't it?
The interior is nice. I love the dash. Very classic 70s sports car.
They really modelled the Nissan S15 off this, didn't they?
Yeah.
The dash is obviously pays homage to this.
I tried to buy new old stock parts wherever I could, and so I managed to get some new old stock door trims. So the whole door trim's brand new from Nissan. Front bonnet and guards are genuine Nissan parts. Windscreen moulds, wiper arms, just little bits and pieces where you could buy them. Rubber seals where I could buy rubber seals which were genuine, I did. I think they're a good investment. The car's nice and quiet inside, no wind noise, no fuel smells or exhaust smells.
Is there much difference on these compared to, say, the US versions? Are they all the same in terms of parts? Or?
Pretty well all the same,
yeah.
Obviously apart from the different driving side, but most of the reproduction parts for these come out of the US because comparatively they sold many more times the number of cars in the US than they did in Australia. So we got pretty small numbers compared to the US.
That makes a big difference. Like you see plenty of cars, they've repainted it, but they haven't really taken into account that the moulds are all messed up. And that's a lot of that stuff is the things I notice on cars. Yeah,
it just comes down to the detail. So you've got to commit to it. I mean, and it's like every other project. You have a figure in your mind what you think it might cost. Yeah. And generally the end result's probably about twice what you think it was to start with.
I think you get to a point though, you're so far in, you kind of got to do it properly.
Yeah,
even if it means it takes another year or two.
Yeah, and it did. So for me this was a 7-year build, and it was never going to be something that would happen in a hurry. And I wanted to make sure I did it properly. And part of that was actually finding a really good panel shop to work with. And as I said, Glenn and Alan from Black Edge was the name of their business. But my car and my brother's car were the last two cars which they did. They'd been in partnership together for many years and just decided they were happy to go their own separate ways. But you look at the door gaps and the body gaps on this, and they are as good as I've seen on any Z. In fact, they're well better than what they came out of the factory for sure. It's a big project to restore one of these. It's like any other car, I guess, but you've got to be committed to it. You can't go into it thinking I'm going to spend 10 grand when you know full well it's going to be 30 or 40 grand.
Yeah. Have you found any problems with the car since you put it all together that you had to change it all? It's all turned out pretty good.
No, it's actually, I kind of surprised myself, to be honest. I expected that I'd have to do a few things, but it's been pretty well out of the box. No issues at all. I was a bit concerned about the cooling system, where the radiator was going to be up to the job, but that works fine. Didn't have to redo anything, didn't really have to remake anything. I'm really happy with the way it drives. It's pleasant to drive, it's comfortable to drive at a good pace though too. It's not compromised in any real areas.
Doesn't matter what shape or size you are, at fullBOOST we've got you covered. Everything from infant size to 5XL. We've got these great kids tops, LS, or is it the mighty Barra? And we've got the traditional fullBOOST ones in boys and girls. So check them out at shop.fullboost.com.au. I don't reckon I've been in a Z since the 90s.
Oh really?
Yeah.